Your aquatic pets deserve only the best care, and that's exactly what Fly and Vet provides. As Idaho's only mobile aquatics veterinarian, Fly and Vet brings their expertise directly to fish owners across the Treasure Valley. From home aquariums to koi ponds and commercial aquaculture, Fly and Vet can provide on-site diagnosis, treatment, and professional water quality testing. Don't wait to give your aquatic pets the care they deserve. Call 208-260-0327 to schedule an appointment today. You can also check them out on Facebook or visit flyandvet.com. Fly and Vet, bringing professional aquatic services directly to your doorstep. Today on CityCast Boise. The Treasure Valley has been talking about commuter rail for decades, but with the record growth and traffic getting worse, there's a new sense of urgency. Could this finally be the moment that Boise gets on board with rail? And if so, what's the price tag? But what will it cost us if we don't do something about this gridlock? It's Monday, September 8th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. Joining me to dive into this story is Idaho Statesman reporter Rose Evans. Thanks so much for being here today, Rose.
Thanks for having me.
Most people in the Treasure Valley have had the experience of white-knuckling through I-84 or the connector gridlock. And, for someone sitting in traffic, listening to this podcast, what could commuter rail change about their daily life?
Yeah, for sure. The traffic on I-84 is something I'm very familiar with, covering the suburbs of Boise. I spend a lot of time on that road. So yeah, I get it. And something that I think the commuter rail could change potentially if it were to happen is the speed of commutes. So the Community Planning Association of Southwest Idaho, or COMPAS, has projected that with the population growth in the valley right now, by 2050, commute times on roads will take 50% longer. So imagine your commute now and take half that and add it on. So meanwhile, a commuter rail can still be disrupted by things like repairs, but not as susceptible to a car accident or something like that. And so the commuter rail, they're projecting it would take 58 minutes to get from downtown Caldwell to the Boise Depot.
Yeah, no, and when I was commuting, easily 35 minutes, easily. So adding on 50% of that again, at that point, you're closing in on 50 minutes an hour. That's, and I'm coming from Meridian. That's a huge chunk of time. So my question is maybe why now? Why did the Community Planning Association of Southwest Idaho, or COMPAS, like you mentioned, decide to make commuter rail its top priority right now? Did something change, or has this been in the works for a while?
Yeah, so this is something that they have been looking into for a while, and I think the most recent study that they're doing is a culmination of a year and a half of work. And I think that something that's different right now is both kind of what I mentioned in terms of the population growth just is really forcing kind of a reckoning for commuters in their cars. So with that traffic just projected to continue getting worse, there's kind of a question of how bad can the traffic get before people are more willing to get behind an alternative like rail. And also I think part of what's different this time is that the results of the study were just, I think, more definitive. That was what the sense that I got from folks that I spoke with at COMPAS. Rail, of the nearly a dozen options for different bus rapid transit routes and other things like that they looked at, rail performed the best definitively as the option people liked best.
And did COMPAS say why they believe that rail is the smartest long-term investment over, I don't know, something like bus rapid transit or something like that? Did they give reasons why outside of just it is very popular?
Yeah, so the study that COMPAS just did was basically looking at exactly that. They looked at, like I said, nearly a dozen routes and modes of transit through the valley, and the goal was to winnow that down. First, they winnowed it down to 6, Then they rented it down to the top 3 performing routes based on a number of different criteria, including how fast could it move riders through the valley, how many riders, like how much demand or how much ridership would it have, things like that. And the top 3 routes were the Boise Cutoff commuter rail route, bus rapid transit along the center median of Franklin and Fairview, and then bus rapid transit along I-84 and the connector. And why the commuter rail performed best was it had the highest ridership of all those options. I think 115% higher than the I-84 option would have been, and 65 to 75% higher than the Fairview Franklin option. And speed was another factor. The fact that there's, in terms of feasibility, there's the railroad corridor through the valley is owned by 2 railroad companies, and so that's a big challenge. But at the same time, there's only 2 landowners that you have to work with instead of potentially dozens if you're looking at acquiring right-of-ways along a road like Franklin or Fairview. It was the most efficient, the fastest, and had some benefits in terms of feasibility, the study found.
And what is the route that Compass is proposing, and how would it function for commuters around the Treasure Valley? Like, where could you get on? Where could you get off? How often would it run? Things like that.
Yeah, so they studied a route from downtown Caldwell, the Caldwell train depot, to the downtown Boise train depot. There is an existing freight corridor there owned by Watco and Union Pacific. So it really just cuts east to west through the Treasure Valley. It runs through downtown Nampa, downtown Meridian, and they looked at 9 stops along the way. And they looked at, these are all really preliminary planning efforts now, so that could change, but they for the purposes of studying the feasibility, they looked at 15-minute peak service and hourly off-peak service, and found that it could carry up to 560 passengers during that peak time.
Summit Innovation Lab invites your child to be part of their first LEGO League team, where fun and learning collide. Through hands-on projects, kids will build and code LEGO robots and then take on exciting competitions that encourage creativity and real-world problem solving. Through these challenges, Summit Innovation Lab will help your child strengthen collaboration and critical thinking skills while also learning to code in a fun way. Guided by knowledgeable coaches and surrounded by a supportive community, kids will discover what it means to be innovative leaders, problem solvers, and a team player, all while having a blast. Head to summitinnovationlab.com to sign up for the league today. I'm excited to share that I've partnered with Huel, Huel, because their Black Edition powder has become my favorite lunchtime solution. If you're like me, lunch can feel like the hardest meal to get to during a busy day. So instead of grabbing fast food or reaching for a snack, I can mix up a quick shake and know I'm getting something that actually sustains me. Each serving of Huel Black Edition is a complete meal with 40 grams of plant-based protein and 27 vitamins and minerals. It's gluten-free, has no added sugar, and for less than $3 a meal, it's convenient and budget-friendly. I've been enjoying the vanilla flavor. It's tasty, satisfying, and keeps me full for hours. And if you're looking for an easy way to get your daily greens, Huel just released their Daily Greens Ready to Drink. No powders, no mixing, just a sparkling super greens drink that's refreshing and ready to go. Try Huel with 15% off for new customers today using my code Boise at huel.com/Boise. That's huel.com/Boise. Fuel your best performance with Huel today. This isn't the first time that the topic of a proposed rail system in the Treasure Valley has come up. It's not even the second or third time. How is this proposal or this study different than the other 6 or so studies that have come before it?
Yeah, so I spoke with Elaine Clegg about this, the CEO of Valley Regional Transit, and she also serves on the Compass board. And this was something that she talked about, was sort of this circular process that planning agencies in the Valley have been in when it comes to studying this, kind of often continuing to ask, do we want rail? And never getting to the point of agreement that, yes, this is something that the Valley wants, and now let's move forward with making it happen. So there have been previous studies. This one is a little bit different in that it uses criteria directly from the Federal Transit Authority. And so it's a type of study that's kind of intended to set the planning agencies up for future federal funding and grants. So the type of environmental review processes that all of these big infrastructure projects would need, this study kind of does some of that work already and is intended to set it up for future work.
And I want to get back to those grants and how those grants could be used, because that's definitely a major piece of this puzzle. But first, I want to look at how realistic do you think that this proposal is, or do advocates of this proposal think that it is? Because it also comes with a 1.5 to 2.5 billion with a B dollar price tag. Are there ways that they could keep costs lower while still creating this functional rail system for the Treasure Valley?
Yeah, so the study came out with a up to $2.5 billion price tag for this project, and that was on the conservative side of cost estimates. In other words, they looked at basically the most it could cost to run an entire second line of track through the whole corridor. So something Compass planners spoke about was that costs could be cut down in a number of ways. Specifically, the term value engineering came up a lot. Could we run one line of rail and use certain passing options to keep costs down instead of running an entire second track? Things like that. Things that would all need to be figured out during the design process. So there are definitely ways to cut costs down, but obviously that number is a estimate today and doesn't necessarily speak to what costs will be for materials and labor in the future. In terms of feasibility, I think the folks that I spoke with at Compass were really focused on the study that they're working on now and how they've gotten to this point. And the conversations around funding and feasibility are kind of still to be determined at this time.
And it sounds like Compass formatted this study in a way that would open us up to be able to receive those federal transit grants and help fund it that way. How much money could we potentially get from those grants? And then how much local money would still be needed to fund commuter rail?
I don't have an exact breakdown for that yet. I think it just really depends on once more work is done into the design and kind of a more specific understanding of the costs. But definitely federal money is something that Compass is looking into. Specifically, there's a category for projects that cost at least $400 million, which this would certainly fall into, and applicants seeking at least $150 million. So that provides kind of a sense of how much money they could go for. But folks at Compass were really clear that that is only part of the puzzle so far. And conversations around local funding are still being worked out. And it's kind of unclear at this time how they would make that happen.
Yeah, because the Idaho legislature has taken a pretty hardline stance against funding transit. We're one of only 2 states where the legislature doesn't fund transit at all. And as a bonus, they've also banned the local tax option, which is how Salt Lake pays for its light rail system. So without these tools, how can this be paid for? Like, what is the plan for how we could find funding for this?
I think federal funding is something that Compass is looking into, and there's also a question of whether now is a moment to renew the planning agency's plea to the legislature to allow some of those local option taxes. And in fact, at one of the Compass presentations on the results of the study, Chris Proud, who is one of the project managers for HDR, which is a private consulting firm that Compass hired to help with this study, was asked, is part of the idea that this could provide some leverage for a new ask for funding? And he said, it's an opportunity. Others at Compass were maybe not so certain. Elaine Clegg talked about really not being sure where these conversations may happen, if they're going to be with state lawmakers or not. But there's certainly the sense that first they're focusing on study and feasibility, and the funding is the next kind of conversation that needs to happen. And something that I thought was interesting from the study was that the top 3 performing routes in the study in general, we have rail that's really expensive, and then we also have 2 options that are not currently would not currently be legal in Ada and Canyon counties. HOV lanes or bus designated lanes are not currently allowable in counties with more than 35,000 people. So the point of the study was really to look at less about what the policy is at the moment or what funding sources there are, even though that was part of the conversation. But I think figuring out how to do this is what planners are focusing on next.
Is Compass hoping that by making commuter rail the agency's primary focus and by having this study, that it could influence the legislature at all? I mean, whether it's funding or they're able to present this data that this is a huge problem, and then maybe we could get HOV lanes or other options. Do they think that this could have some sway on legislators?
It sounds like that could be the hope. I think there's a focus on being unified in their vision to the public, to stakeholders, and to lawmakers that are paying attention as well. That kind of signals to folks who are paying attention that that's something that Compass is serious about.
And the Idaho Department of Transportation is looking to add a 5th lane to I-84 between Boise and Nampa, and their improvement plan includes a $100 million price tag. Is it sustainable to keep widening the freeway to try to alleviate all of the congestion?
In terms of sustainability, the right-of-ways that ITD has only allow for one more lane on the whole corridor, the whole I-84 corridor between Nampa and Boise. So there's, a limit to how wide you can make the freeway, both in terms of how helpful that could be for congestion and also just in terms of how much land ITD has. I've spoken with folks at ITD about their plan to widen the freeway. They're currently studying it. They've signaled their intention in their draft 7-year plan that mobility improvements on the freeway, such as lane widening, are something that they anticipate. But that 5th lane is all they really have. So there's kind of a question that I think traffic engineers and transit leaders are thinking about, which is what's after that.
Yeah, so it sounds like we're kind of hitting a hard wall on that, where if you don't have the land, you don't have the land. Is there any possibility we can get both? I mean, I know we don't have unlimited money, but can we widen I-84 and have a rail system? Like, is that even potentially a possibility?
Yeah, I spoke to some folks at Compass around this question of, are these two things diametrically opposed? If we widen the freeway, will the support for commuter rail go down because it's faster to drive on the highway? And so why would you want to take the train? And the answer I got was that Compass really, as a planning agency, looks at the whole system of transportation in the valley, and they don't really see it as this sort of zero-sum game between roads and transit. They look at all of the options for getting people efficiently around the valley. And so At the federal level with funding, they also mentioned that roads and rails are funded by different agencies at the federal level, so they're not necessarily competing in the same way for grants. Of course, as you said, there's a finite supply of money at the state level, but they don't seem to be viewing those in opposition at this time.
The Treasure Valley is closing in on 1 million residents, and there have recently been some estimates that suggest that the valley could add over 1 million people in the next decade. So what kind of an impact would doubling our population have on traffic with our current infrastructure if we don't commit to some kind of high capacity transit system or some kind of a rail system?
Yeah, so Compass's projection is that by 2050, the population of Ada and Canyon County will not only surpass 1 million, but by 2055, it's expected to hit 1.3 million. And taking into account that growth while also factoring in road improvements that are already funded and expected to happen in that time, the Planning Association expects that traveling between Boise and Caldwell will take 50% longer. So that's kind of the impact that's anticipated on roads.
So Rose, what comes next? We've got Compass committing to this idea of commuter rail. We've got this study. Where do we go from here?
So in the short term, Compass still needs to kind of finalize this commitment. They voted that commuter rail is their preliminary, locally preferred transit alternative. But the final results of the study are anticipated to be voted on whether to be adopted at a board meeting this winter. The next step is really, in the big picture, the next step that Compass would need to underdo is future federal environmental review and design, a process called a NEPA. But between then and now, they have to determine if they can find a dedicated funding source. So in order to go through that NEPA process and to both do the design and also seek federal grants, the federal government is going to want to see that there's some type of dedicated funding source here locally to not just build the rail, but actually to operate it. So between now and the NEPA, that's kind of the main question that Compass is going to need to figure out.
Well, Rose, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to break this down and explain more about what you found while investigating this issue. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you enjoyed the episode, that's a great reason to become a CityCast Boise neighbor. Head to membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with a look at Boise from a Californian's perspective. Catch you then.